Happy Bonobo Day, and welcome to Talking Apes on Apes Like Us. Hi, I'm Jerry Ellis, the host of Talking Apes, and on this episode, we're joined by two folks who, well, they probably know and love bonobos as much as anyone on our planet. It's Ariel Rogers, the executive director of Friends of Bonobo, and Dr. Brian Hare, professor of evolutionary anthropology and psychology at Duke University. Brian is also on the board of directors of Friends of Bonobos. And just a side note, Brian was our very first guest here on Talking Apes. You can listen to the audio-only version of that by checking out the link in the show notes at the end of this video. Or you can go on to Talking Apes at talkingapes.org on our website, and you can find it as well. He was here 5 years ago on Bonobo Day when we chatted about bonobos and Survival of the Friendliest, Brian's book with co-author Vanessa Woods. Like I said, you can check out all of that on our website at talkingapes.org, talkingapes.org. On this episode, we're celebrating the amazing and often misunderstood bonobo. You know, bonobos in their very short history around apes like us, it has inspired a lot of attention around sexual behavior. Behavior that has drawn so much media attention that bonobos, well, they're a lot more than just sex. Like chimpanzee, are not only our close cousins, but as Brian's book suggests, that being friendly might be a unique survival strategy that we could take to heart and learn a lot from. In this episode, we discovered that bonobos are unique in both where they live and how they live, their culture. It's led by females. And how Friends of Bonobos, through Lola Ya Bonobo, the sanctuary in the Democratic Republic of Congo, is playing a key role in their rescue and their survival. So let's jump into this special episode of Talking Apes World Bonobo Day with Ariel Rogers and Dr. Brian Hare. Hi, you guys, and welcome to Talking Apes. I am delighted to have you both. This is kind of fun for us. We don't usually have two guests simultaneously, but Ariel, it's fun to have you. And Brian, it's good to see you again. You were our very first guest ever on Talking Apes.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to be here again.
It's talking about bonobos. What a surprise.
Our favorite thing to talk about.
Exactly. Well, I guess I wanted to start with something that's going to seem very simplistic to both of you, but what is a bonobo? You know, because I think there's people hear about bonobos, but they hear about, you know, female to female sex, and that's about all they hear about. Or, you know, there was, I think they were the hippie apes or something like that was a common phrase a few years ago, but they really are a bit of a mystery. I mean, we've only known them from our research. I think, you know, for Tana, their first research site was set up in about early 70s, 72 or 3, something like that. And so if you think about it, it's only about 50 years that we have been looking at bonobos, and yet we almost publicly know so little about them. And so what is a bonobo?
Ariel, you want to take that?
Well, sure. I'll give okay, so I'm definitely, Brian's definitely more of an expert on bonobos than me, but maybe that makes me, almost makes it easier for me to talk about them from a non-expert point of view. So, yeah, bonobos are, other than chimps, our closest living relative, whereas we are equally related to chimps and bonobos. But unlike chimps and unlike all other great apes, of which humans are also one, bonobos don't kill each other. So while they are, they live in the same environment, they live in the Congo, and they only live in the Democratic Republic of Congo specifically. So they have a small area that they live in. As a result, they're endangered, and mostly endangered from poaching. But what makes bonobos so unique is that they are a matriarchal culture, and the females band together to stop violence, whether that's amongst males or male to female violence. But the females, as a matriarchy, band together in groups to stop violence, which is one of the main reasons that we think that we don't see bonobos killing each other.
Until late. It's we'll get into that in a little bit, but apparently there has been some violence recorded, which was kind of interesting to look at. But again, it was females taking charge and controlling how things happen there. So that'll be maybe we can dig into that in a.
Yeah, yeah, I have theories on that one. I'm happy to share later. Share
Oh,
later.
okay, great to hear that. Um, So yeah, I think it's important for people to realize where they live because that has a lot to do with not only are they different in many aspects from chimpanzees, which we tend to hear a lot more about, but the thing that's interesting to bonobos to me is the fact that being isolated, south of the Congo River and how that all came about from an evolutionary standpoint, how we got to the place we are now. Um, and I don't know, do either one of you wanna chat about that for a minute?
That one's for you, Brian.
Well, it's a tough one. Thanks, Ariel. No, but I think I'll try my best here. The Congo River, it really kind of divides the habitat that is ape friendly in Central Africa, and north of the Congo River is chimp and gorilla land, and south of the Congo River is bonobo land. And so, as you said, Jerry, there's this question: why is it that bonobos are by themselves south of the Congo River? And it's actually really not clear. There are hypotheses that I think are exciting and promising about why that might be. But to start, it is a mystery, as you said, and it's one of the fun things that scientists are trying to understand is like how could it be that these two different species that are as closely related as wolf and dog, if we're talking about chimpanzees and bonobos,
Yeah.
how they could have diverged so much, especially in their social behavior, even though north and south of the Congo River today in the current environment is basically, identical in most ways in terms of if you're just north of the Congo River and you're just south of the Congo River, I mean, the food and the space is very, very similar. So how could they be so different as a result of living where they do?
This happened sort of 1 to 2 million years ago, right? This sort of split, that we think happened between chimps and bonobos, and
Yeah, so the best genomic comparisons or the best evidence from genomic comparisons have put it at around 1.5. Some people have gone back even further than that. So it's a relatively recent speciation event. If you think about when the human lineage split from the other ape lineages, it's 5 to 7 million years ago. So bonobos and chimpanzees split relatively recent to that. And so the question is, how could they have diverged in the ways that they have in relatively short time, evolutionarily speaking? So there are hypotheses about that, ideas about how it may have happened. And really the key ingredients are food and competition with other species. So one idea that has been proposed by Richard Wrangham, which is probably the leading idea, is that at some point a population that was the common ancestor of both chimpanzees and bonobos, a population was isolated below south of the Congo River, or at least which is now south of the Congo River. And in that area, the idea is that there was no competition over 1 million years, or relatively little competition with other apes. And today there are no gorillas there. So the idea is that bonobos, if you're a chimpanzee, for instance, if you're a chimpanzee in Congo Brazzaville, there are many chimpanzees that directly compete for food against gorillas. And if you're a bonobo and you have an empty stomach and you got to get up in the morning and make your way through the day and find food, you don't have to worry about showing up and meeting gorillas eating all your food, when there's not that much food available, periodically, seasonally. So the idea is that there was more food available, and that shaped bonobo society because there wasn't competition with gorillas. The other idea is there just was more food. That south of the Congo River, over the past million years, either the quality of the food, the amount of food, the food was less seasonal, but both ideas, whether it was competition with another species or, more food availability, the idea is that there was a richer resources that were more predictable, and that really set the scene for a speciation between bonobos and chimpanzees, where chimpanzees have less predictable resources and bonobos have more predictable resources, and that the ideas shape their behavior, psychology, and in many ways their morphology and physiology too.
Why is food the driving factor in the thinking of this split? What other factors would there have been that could have?
Well, I mean, there are other factors that can cause evolution that would be random. So just the population that was south of the Congo River just happened to have some genes that were different than the population to the north through random chance. It could have been just an accumulation of random genetic changes. And if it was going to be directional change through natural selection, food is obviously one we've already covered. That would be a normal candidate. But another would be, and one that has typically been considered in shaping social behavior, would be predation. That maybe south of the Congo River, there just wasn't, the same level of predatory pressure, but based on what we know about the megafauna north and south of the Congo River, I mean, the same leopards would have been there to prey on, the first proto-bonobos, just as they were, preying upon the chimpanzees just north of them. So there's no clear predatory reason. So that sort of leaves us with food resources as the main driver that would lead to directional evolution.
But because of the habitat that it's in, there's just not a lot of fossil evidence that's laying around. It's not like you have in East Africa, for example, or Southern Africa, where you have, it's drier and you have elements that allow you to see fossil evidence. There's just not a lot of fossil evidence of these of the joint species that we think, that proto bonobo, proto chimp that they both split from. I assume that's one of the reasons it's caused the ambiguity about the whole thing.
I mean, yes, absolutely. The reason it's hard to test, usually, if you've got fossil evidence, that gives you another line of evidence where you can look at over time. You can look at changes in diet through different assays, and you can look at changes in teeth and all sorts of other morphological changes, and you can really use fossil evidence to test an idea. But because tropical forests are really good at decomposition, there really are not any fossils to speak of. And I usually, when I teach human evolution in classes, I usually joke that if there was a creationist, really what they should be arguing is that chimpanzees and bonobos were created by God, because there's no fossil evidence where they came from. Humans, we have millions of years of fossils. That's easy. It's chimps and bonobos that we can't, really have the fossil evidence for.
I can see the comments lining up underneath this podcast right now on that one.
This is bonobos. It can't be boring.
True. Ariel, I wanted to ask, you were describing, some of the basics of what a bonobo is. If I'm an 8-year-old or 80-year-old, I guess, and I walked in to a forest and there was a chimp and there was a bonobo standing there, how would I tell the difference?
Oh boy. Well, they look a little different. Bonobos are a little smaller. Their faces are black. Their skin is blacker. It's not as light. Chimps have a lighter colored face, so they tend to be more light brown. Let's see what else. Oh, bonobos have a really, really cute middle hair part. Like all of them, they all have this middle part with their hair going like perfectly.
All of them?
Pretty much all of them, yeah. And that's a real tell. Chimps don't have that. What else? If you see a chimp, in the woods, I don't know, I guess you should run if you see either, but like definitely don't hang around. Yeah, I those are the biggest physical differences that I can think of off the top of my head.
I guess I should ask right out of the gate, have both of you or either of you seen chimps or bonobos in the wild?
Go ahead, Ariel. Sorry.
I've seen bonobos at Lola Bonobos. I've seen them in a semi-wild environment. I'm going to in a couple of months. I'm going to Ecola, which is where we rewild bonobos. So those bonobos are wild, and I'll get to see them if they choose to come nearby where we might be able to see them. Then I might get to see some. But I have not, other than the semi-wild environment of our sanctuary, which is pretty wild environment, but it is still a sanctuary. Not seen them, specifically in the wild. Brian?
I should say you said in a couple of months, and I should say Happy Bonobo Day to both of you because, I mean, this is February 14th, it's World Bonobo Day, and so it's a couple of months from now that you're trekking into the.
That's right.
Both of you are going, I guess.
No, I'm
Uh,
going. I don't think
oh,
Brian's going on this trip, but he
oh,
was there
okay,
recently, so
okay,
or at least at the sanctuary recently, yeah.
right.
And I have seen wild chimps and wild bonobos and worked with them in captivity in a whole bunch of different settings.
I did want to make that distinction because I had a few questions about wild ones versus what we see in captivity with bonobos in particular, and I guess chimps as well at times. But there is a distinction there. But going back to recognizing them, I mean, when you look at photographs, and we'll have photographs going up on while we're talking. One of the things that strikes me about them is the delicateness of them. They're sort of thinner build. They don't have the same robust, I guess we would say, some more gracile sort of structure. Is that just simply evolution at play over the last couple million years, or is there some reason that we think that they seem to be a little bit more? I'm trying to figure out the right word here. Wiry. They're more wiry framed.
Yeah.
They just look.
You said it, gracile.
Yeah.
The scientific term, and I don't know how popular that term is, but they're not as robust.
Right.
And it certainly is the case that male bonobos in particular are not as robust as male chimpanzees. I mean, male chimpanzees, are they are when they're adults and fully competing for their status in their group. I mean, they are like the jocks of the family. And bonobo males are they're beautiful, and they also can be quite intimidating, but they're just not as quite as big. And I think gracile is a good way to talk about them. Female bonobos and female chimpanzees are actually quite similar in size, and build, relatively speaking. There are important differences, but if you were just to see them, it really is the males that it stands out quickly that they're different. And then you were just asking that question about, so why are they built differently? And one of the arguments is around aggression, that there's actually been over the million years that the two species were separated that we talked about, there's actually been selection against male aggression in bonobos. And as Ariel rightly said, while people spend so much time talking about their sexual proclivities, which of course as a human is, hard to resist learning about, that's actually, in my mind, not what makes them special. What makes them remarkable is they're the only species in our ape family that doesn't murder. And the argument is that there's been selection against lethal aggression in bonobos, and that males in particular have been shaped to be far less aggressive, and in that they can be very aggressive in terms of, do they get in fights and do they bite each other and all that kind of stuff? Absolutely, and they do it at very similar rates to chimpanzees, but it never reaches the severe level, the lethal level that you see in chimpanzees. And so the argument is that is actually reflected, that selection, that evolution is reflected in their appearance, that they're more gracile, and the males are they're technically actually not smaller than East African chimpanzees, but they are I think more slender appearing.
Well, and I think some of that confusion came. I mean, they used to at one point they were called pygmy chimps,
Mm.
and so I don't know how much that played into people's thinking about them being smaller.
Yeah,
Because naturally.
Richard likes to joke that Richard. This is Richard Wrangham, my primatologist who's carried out tons of field work in Uganda and studied chimpanzees and bonobos. Was my PhD mentor, and he likes to joke that bonobos aren't pygmy; they're pygmy-headed, and the males are pygmy-headed. The male chimpanzees have a much smaller head than male. Male bonobos have a much smaller head than male chimpanzees.
Mm. Uh, just curious because I haven't looked at a bonobo skull. Do they have shorter canines as well? I mean, is it like is everything just proportionally smaller, or are there some distinctive elements of a bonobo skull versus a chimp skull that you would go, you know, for example, the
Yes. So
canines?
Yes. So one of the main differences that immediately is striking, especially if you're out with Ariel meeting a wild chimpanzee or bonobo, and being worried about it, is if they were to yawn, which they might, because they might be stressed too, and that might be what they do. Then you would. See their canines, and chimpanzee canines, especially male chimpanzee canines, are quite impressive, and definitely something to be easily intimidated by. And when you see bonobo canines, if you had never seen a chimpanzee, maybe you're like, oh, those are pretty big canines compared to mine. But compared to chimpanzee canines, you're kind of like, oh, those are cute. They really just don't have, basically they have the equivalent of like juvenile male chimpanzee hardware when it comes to their canines in an adult bonobo's mouth.
See, something I also physically that I wanted to ask you both about is I haven't had the chance to spend any time with bonobos, um, but I've spent a huge amount of time with chimps, both in sanctuary settings, semi-wild, and in the wild. In terms of their skill set with their hands, what
Mm.
I'm really fascinated by what bonobos can do. Like, do we see the, and maybe this is easier for you, Brian, since you've spent time with both of them, um, is do we see the same level of dexterity in the hands, or is it greater in bonobos, or less so, like manipulating things, just working, just, picking something out of a piece of
Coming
fruit?
Is this question coming from the observation that chimpanzees are famous for making tools, and bonobos have not been observed to make tools to process food? Is that part of the question?
I that it's leading to that. Yeah, I just wondered that, like, the size and the ability to use the hands because, um, we've got somebody coming on a podcast, later in the season talking about the evolution of feet and hands and
Mm.
across great apes and looking at, I mean, for example, all the other apes basically are four-wheel drive. They can still use their feet to get where they need to go. We, on the other hand, are pretty pathetic at it, and I can attest to that because I tried to climb some trees and do some filming of chimpanzees at Gombe once, and the minute I got up there, they just leapt over to another tree and kept going, and I had to go all the way back down, go over, climb back up, and I was pretty. Even though I'm a pretty good climber, I was pretty pathetic at it. I mean, I'm sure they were laughing the whole time. Let's go over there and force him to do this, and I just wondered about in terms of bonobos, if there's a do we see any differentiation between those and chimps in terms of what they're able to do with their hands, how they can manipulate an object, tool use? Do we see
I think that's the
evidences of
main.
some of those things?
I think the main difference is I'm not aware of a study on showing differences in manual dexterity. It may be there are subtle differences, but just let's say relative. If gorilla is the outgroup, both species relative to gorillas are quite good with manual dexterity.
Mhm.
And what the puzzle is, the mystery is that in the case of bonobos, while they do have great manual dexterity, as evidenced by the fact that they make all sorts of tools in captivity, including processing foods at Lola Bonobo and other captive sites. They use rocks to crack open nuts. They do all sorts of things, use sticks to process different foods. None of that has been observed in the wild. So they do use tools in the wild. They use tools, so they'll use an umbrella, or they might make shoes to cover their feet as they climb into a tree.
Wait,
But they
stop. They make shoes? No
Yes,
one
there have
listening.
been
No one listening to this is going to follow that one. So you need to explain.
Okay, so sometimes if you've spent any time in a tropical rainforest, there can be trees that aren't very happy that you're there and try to keep you away from them, and they do that by growing, horrible thorns. And so one of the approaches that bonobos take to dealing with that, because sometimes they want to go in those trees and process or get food, whatever, is they'll take leaves, they'll ball them up, and they'll hold them in their feet as they climb into the tree. They can put their weight, and it doesn't poke the bottoms of their feet. So they have been seen to use, tools in that sense. But there haven't been any observations in the wild of them using rocks to crack open nuts, to use sticks to get access to foods that they can't get access to otherwise, whether it's insects or, honey or bush babies like chimpanzees will do, even to kill a bush baby and eat meat. None of that has been observed in the wild, yet in captivity, they are as good, if not better, with tools than chimpanzees in all sorts of cognitive tasks. So it's a big mystery why this isn't happening in the wild.
Wow. Do you think, going back to, how we kind of started this off, we've known about them for 50 years, basically, in the wild. But they live in a very difficult place to do research and to study and observe them. And from what I understand, there's sort of two Western groups and then a more Eastern group. So they're sort of split into three groups, which I also wanted to chat about with a little later, because now we're learning that those are three genetically separate groups, which could have impact on their survival going forward. But is it just simply because we haven't had enough time to observe them, do you think? Or they don't need to because the things that they're eating don't require the same level of tool use that they might in, one of the other, like in Fingoli, for example, where, Jill Priest has got all kinds of evidence of tool use by the chimps there, from spearing bush babies to, nut cracking to all kinds of things going on. So
Yeah, so I think the ideas of why it hasn't been observed are observation time that people have suggested. I don't think that's it anymore, because there actually has been enough observation. There's at multiple sites there's been more than enough time that it should have been observed. The other is maybe those the resources to make tools aren't readily available. It is true that people who have studied chimpanzee tool use, especially using hammer and anvil, at Wamba, there was an effort to is there a good source of rocks? And the argument was, well, maybe not really. Maybe there's not really a good place to find rocks, even though the same nuts that chimpanzees crack open are there. But other than that, it's not real. I mean, you can use a stick. I mean, there's sticks everywhere. So it's not clear why they're not using tools to process food, other than perhaps it's just part of this. They lived in a more predictable environment, and it's not something they needed to fall back on. And then in captivity, they have this cognitive ability that expresses when they have the time and the interest in exploring things.
yeah. Um, we've mentioned Lola Bonobo a couple of times. Maybe we should jump to that for a minute and have one of you, Ariel, if you want to talk about what it is, where it is, why it is, and a little bit of the history behind it, because I think it's incredibly significant to this conversation. Not only because you represent Friends of Bonobo, both of you, but it has been a place where we have had a chance to observe bonobos, on a daily basis all day long. So
Yeah,
yeah, maybe we
absolutely.
could describe exactly physically where it is, and then what it looks like if I were to walk into it today, and what would I be looking at and why?
Yeah, sure. So Lola Bonobo is the world's only bonobo sanctuary, and it was founded in the mid 90s by Claudine Andre, a Belgian national who grew up in the Congo. Her father was a veterinarian at the Kinshasa Zoo. And when the first Congo War, that's what they call it, the first Congo War, happened, they abandoned the zoo. And so all the animals in the zoo were just, had no food, had no help, no support. So she was taking care of actually a lot of the different animals from the zoo, managed to find places for most of them, fell in love with the bonobos, and also, frankly, nobody was willing to take the little bonobos because they didn't really want these big primates in their homes, etc. So, that was sort of the reason for her starting the sanctuary, but, that was, 30 years ago now, and in that time, Lola Bonobo has grown into a, rehabilitation center, really. So it's a place where orphaned baby bonobos, will be rescued. When they are rescued from, a poacher, typically, they end up at Lola Bonobo, where they are nursed back to health by a surrogate mother. And then they stay in a nursery environment until they're old enough to go into the main enclosures. Um, the sanctuary is 100 acres, so it's a nice big space. That's why I say a semi-wild environment for the bonobos. Yes, they have enclosures, but it's pretty big. And it's just outside Kinshasa. So it might, on the map, look like you could get there in about 10 minutes if you were in the States driving on a normal car on a normal road, but it's the Congo. And it used to take about an hour, hour and a half, but currently the road's washed out, so it takes about 4 hours, Brian. I don't know if you knew that, Brian, but the main road washes out all the time, but it is like washed out, like done. So anyway, you can still get there, but you need four-wheel drive, and in some ways that isolation is not necessarily a bad thing. But we do have a lot of visitors and rely on visitor income, so it's not always the best to not have people come. It's also an education center, so it's a place where when the road is passable, we have uh, kids come from all schools all over Kinshasa, and they'll come in a big bus, and they spend the whole day there, and they do the tour of the sanctuary, and they learn all about bonobos and biodiversity, Congolese biodiversity in general, and why they should protect it. I could talk for the next 2 hours and just talk about Lily Bonobo. So why don't you tell me if you have specific questions? That's an
Well, go
overview.
for it.
Yeah, how's that for an
We'll just
overview?
make this hours long.
Yeah.
Just go for it. No, no, I'm curious about the sanctuary because, again, this is not a species that people have a lot of contact with. And I would say that if you look on the internet, probably the vast majority of images you're gonna see come from Lola. It's people who's had a chance because you can actually see them there. You're not in the middle of the Congo rainforest trying to find them. And as a filmmaker and photographer, it's ideal when you get to have an open, clear shot at an animal that's not going to run away from you immediately. And so, that's most of the images that people see. But I'm curious about where the behavior in the wild and what happens in the semi-wild enclosure crossover. For example, like chimpanzees and like most of the apes, they need it. An orphan comes in, they need an enormous amount of individual care. They need, because they would be with their moms in the wild. And so they come into the sanctuary. Is it all women that take care of them? Do they replicate that kind of experience for that orphan by having only women caretakers? Are there men caretakers there? What's that process when you get an orphan in from poaching, or probably poaching is the main
Primary
reason.
cause. Yeah.
Yeah, so what is that process that they go through?
So when they first come in, first of all, yes, all the surrogate mamas are female, and they do, sort of mimics how things are in the wild. It's a one-to-one relationship when the bonobo first comes into the sanctuary. And while it's true that all sanctuaries, all great apes, humans included, that don't have parents need a certain amount of care in order to survive. Bonobos need a much higher level of care due to the fact that they won't survive without a certain amount of love and affection. Um, and that's something else that's particularly unique to bonobos. Human beings, chimps, all the other great apes can survive just with food, just with nourishment, just by having our bodies be taken care of. Bonobos will not survive just by having their bodies being taken care of. They have to have that kind of physical and connection and attachment. In the human world, we call it attachment parenting, right? It's just like that's what we call how you raise your kids. But that in the bonobo world, that's just how these mamas have to treat these baby bonobos when they come into the sanctuary in order for them to survive. So you typically spend somewhere from 4 to 6 weeks in a quarantine environment. So they have a separate space where they are 24/7 with the bonobos. They get little breaks and another mom will come in and take over. But for the most part, it's 1-to-1. And obviously, we have other caretakers that do handle the baby bonobos during that time, particularly the vets. So we have some male vets and some female vets, and they will obviously also handle the bonobos and help with their physical care during that time. But during that quarantine, it's 1-to-1, mama to bonobo. They stay there until they are sure that they're well enough to be able to handle being part of the rest of the nursery, and then they'll be introduced to the rest of the nursery. By then, they've kind of got a little bit more. They've attached to this one female, the one surrogate mom, and that surrogate mom's always still available to them. But they also have other moms available to them, and then it becomes more, again, a little bit more like the natural bonobo environment where the females are all taking care of all the kids together.
So let me just jump in and
Yeah.
just
Please.
emphasize some of what makes the sanctuary so remarkable, and just echo some of what Ariel said. First, world's only bonobo sanctuary. And the second is that 100% Congolese run. There is nobody there doing any of what Ariel just described who is not Congolese. And we are a part of Friends of Bonobos, which is the American NGO that supports that mission by raising awareness of bonobos and their efforts to not only rehabilitate but release back into the wild bonobos. And the other thing is, as you said, Jerry, when I've had the great fortune of working there as a researcher, and before I started going, first trip I went again with Richard Rang, we talked about earlier. We went in 2005, and before we went in 2005, there had never been a direct comparison between chimpanzees and bonobos, a quantitative direct comparison. And the part of the reason was there was no place where you could find a large group of bonobos, because at Lola there are usually around 70 to 80 bonobos being cared for. And the next largest captive population in any one place is 20. And so most places that have bonobos that you could go observe and play games with to see how they think and solve problems, it's just not the capability that you have at Lola. And the other thing is, unfortunately, because the babies being rescued are babies, that sets up an amazing scientific opportunity to study development. And we think that a lot of what makes, back to the beginning of the conversation, what makes these two species so different is importantly going to begin to emerge in development. So I would just say to echo what Ariel said, is that those are some incredible points about Lola is, saving bonobos one baby at a time, but all Congolese working on it. And as far as I know, it's the largest conservation education program in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has the largest remaining wild populations of all apes.
Yeah, I mean, we've often talked, in various places, not just on this podcast, but the fact that if you were going to have to just save apes on this planet, the Congo is the place you save. you just put all your resources there, because you have gorillas, you have chimps, bonobos. There's no other place that you have all this. Well, part of the reason, thank you for bringing that up, and especially the chance to observe them in their development is because, and that's part of the reason I asked you, Ariel, about do they have female keepers? Like, is there anything happening going back to the fact that they're matriarchal in their groups, um, and even in bringing up what, the research I've read about bringing up little males. Females have such huge influence on those little males. I wonder, how do we replicate that when you have these little orphans that come in at, various ages? I am assuming they come in all the way from, tiny infants perhaps to, maybe they're a year or two old, based on, how the poaching business works in that part of the world. Um, but if you're trying to raise this little baby in a semi-wild captive setting, but yet your long-term goal is to put it back in the wild. And so how do you replicate that matriarchal wild cultural setting in a captive setting? So what are the elements that you're thinking about to ensure that these little bonobos can grow up, go back in the wild and be bonobos and not become little chimps?
I'm sure there's some nuance that Brian can speak to that I can't, but what I can tell you is that it does, you know, it naturally occurs in the groups that the females take charge. So that's already happening. There are three main groups of enclosures in the enclosures, and the females are in charge of all of them. In one, there's just one main female, Semendwa. She's probably one of the most photographed bonobos in the world. And a lot of the photos you see are of her, especially if you see a bonobo at the front with like water in front of them, like with their arms up, maybe grabbing food. That's usually Semendwa. Anyway, there are in the other enclosures, in one of the other enclosures, it's a group of two females that are the matriarchs, and that's common in the bonobo world too, to have multiple females be matriarchs, not just one, or be in charge rather. Yeah, that's happening in the enclosures. It's true that there are often struggles for young male bonobos because in the bonobo world, a young male bonobo's hierarchical, what's the word I'm looking for? His Where he stands in his bonobo culture is totally based on his mother's, where she stands in their world. There's a word I'm looking for. I'm not finding, but you know what I'm trying to say. And so it is a little bit tough in the sanctuary environment because they're raised by the surrogate mom, and obviously the human mother, is not in the enclosure with them anymore. And so there have been times they've put young male bonobos into an enclosure and they haven't done particularly well and they get ostracized, and then they have to try another enclosure and see if they do better there. Um, One of the things that we mentioned, that Brian mentioned earlier about our programs is the bonobos don't live in the sanctuary forever. They're being rewilded back, they're going back into the wild. And as we continue to release groups of bonobos, these kinds of things actually become less of a concern because as they go into the wild environment, they have the opportunity to move amongst the groups themselves and sort this out in whatever way they need to. Um, but yeah, it's complex, and what I can tell you is that the staff at the sanctuary puts a lot of thought and effort into where the bonobos what enclosures the bonobos will go into when they have to leave the nursery and go into a main enclosure, and then what group they'll be a part of when they're rewilded into the forest, the protected area.
And I will say, just to echo and go hark back to your question about when they're little, what is it like to care for them, and how, because they're, you know, uh, have a female dominant society or co-dominant society, however people want to describe it. What do we have to do that's different? I think the main thing to understand is, and this is from being with Claudine Andre, the founder, and her approach, and seeing it play out so many times, having been there so many times when infants came, and then also having been at chimpanzee sanctuaries where orphans came in that were chimpanzees. I mean, chimpanzees need a lot of care when they come in as orphans for sure, but bonobos are just a lot more fragile and sensitive at that age, and they absolutely have to immediately have a lot of physical contact and be with, basically a surrogate mom. And if they don't receive that level of TLC, that level of love, they're not going to do well. And a chimpanzee, they need to be with some kind of social interaction, but they're a little bit more robust. You've got to, if you leave them overnight, if they've got to be alone for a couple hours during the day, that kind of thing, they're not gonna. It's not gonna be a big deal. But relative to what's going to happen with a bonobo. So I will say they need a lot more intensive care when they come in when they're young. And then just to flip to your point about, bonobo is the hippie ape, bonobo is the peaceful ape. It is absolutely the case that no bonobo, at least in captivity, has been observed. You seem to say that you've got a case where maybe there's a report of a wild bonobo maybe with lethal aggression. But I know that there's been banter about this among primatologists. So, but I've yet to read the paper. So the in general, there's relative to chimpanzees, there's almost no, if any, lethal aggression. However, where I'm trying to get to with this is to say that if you're a young bonobo male, you certainly don't feel like you live in the peaceful group, in the peaceful species, because especially if you're an orphan and you don't have a mom to back you up. Zana Clay and others have wonderful evidence. We have evidence from long ago that these infants that are orphans that are male are really kind of the scapegoats in the group. They get really targeted with a lot of aggression, it is not the case that they would feel like they live in the peaceful species. Or they're like, wait, we're supposed to be hippies? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But the difference is when they are ostracized, attacked. We can. What happens at Lola is, from a chimpanzee management perspective, is a miracle. Because you can take a young male bonobo who has no relatives in the group and you can put them into that group and you are sure that they will not be murdered by the other bonobos. When you do that at a chimpanzee group in a chimpanzee sanctuary, that's impossible. And in fact, what you have to do is you have to raise peers that are the same age, and you have to have cohorts that you put into social groups. You can't just take a bunch of orphans and put them in with adult males and females. That's not going to work. You have to just raise cohorts and keep them together that way. And you don't have to do that at Lola. You can put the orphans in with the adult social group.
Are there certain females at Lola that cannot go back into the wild because of, for whatever reason, and are the like ideal surrogate moms for in running the groups?
Some females and males that'll never be able to be rewilded at Lola. There's one male bonobo who was raised by silent monks, and when he was rescued, or I guess I don't really know his whole rescue story, but when he was, given to Lola as we shouldn't probably have this bonobo, and he was by then a young adult. I mean, he was full grown male, and but he'd lived in mostly silence his whole life, and then
Ariel, if I can interrupt for a second, wait a second. The silent monks? That just seems bizarre to me because this little bonobo had no vocal interaction.
that's right. Capolo is his name, and he was raised in an environment of silence. And when he was a few years old, he came to Lola, Bonobo, the sanctuary, and immediately got eye infections in both of his eyes, and it took 6 months for one to resolve and almost a year for the other. So he basically effectively went from hearing nothing to hearing lots and lots of noises he'd never heard before, but being blind and not being able to see anything. So this guy was really, as you can imagine, pretty freaked out. The good news is he's doing great. I mean, he's alive and he's relatively happy bonobo, but he doesn't really belong to any of the groups. He has his own area that they've sort of created for him that he can go be in, and he can, he has other bonobos that will jump the fence and visit him until he gets annoyed and says, "Go away." So he's a bit of a loner, and they've made space for him to be a loner. So he's an example of one of the bonobos that will never be able to be rewilded. Now we do have this in our vision, in our 5-year vision plan. We are hoping to have a semi-wild release site that would be an island where we could have an environment for but all of the bonobos or many of the bonobos who could never be released back to the wild, but they could live in this on an island where they could be seen, maybe studied a little bit, but also have a lot more freedom and a lot more space. That's part of our 5-year vision plan. So that's in the works. But for now, he can't go live in the wild, and he can't go live on the quarantine island that's the middle. When we release bonobos back to the wild, they spend 6 to 12 months in quarantine on an island. He can't go live on an island because it makes him too uncomfortable to be around other bonobos at that level. So, so he's an example of a candidate that will never be released back to the wild.
He has a monk culture from the beginning,
Yeah.
so, like, he
He's
has a monk culture now.
Yeah,
He
he's just like,
likes
"I'd like my space, please."
I got nothing better as a scientist than that. That was good, Jerry. I like that.
I don't know where else to go with that.
Yeah.
If you're raised by monks, you're gonna be monk-like, I guess. I
Yep,
don't know. I don't know.
apparently.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you, Brian, mentioned that there's about 70 of them there. So is that the normal carrying capacity for the sanctuary? Or, I mean, do you try to keep it at that, or is that something that's grown over the life of the sanctuary, which is what you said, about 30 years old now?
Typically, between 70 and 80 bonobos at any given time are at the sanctuary. That number is growing and growing fast in the sense that bonobos, we didn't used to a lot of the bonobos wouldn't survive. So we would rescue bonobos and they would die. Bonobos are incredibly susceptible to respiratory illnesses, so they get the flu and die. And so that number was kind of hovering around 70, 75 for a very long time. Um, Now we're rewilding and it's still hovering around 70, 75, meaning even though we're getting, we just took 15 bonobos 2 years ago and put them in the wild, and now we're back up to 80. That tells you that not only are we doing a better job of keeping them alive, certainly the younger ones especially, but also the poaching is getting worse, or it's quite likely the poaching hasn't actually gotten worse, but all of the awareness building activities that we've been doing in and around the environment where we know the poaching is happening has made the communities more aware, and so they're letting us know when there's a bonobo, and then we are just getting more and more bonobos every year.
When somebody contacts you, they say they have a bonobo. I'm certain there's laws on the books in DRC that say that this is illegal to poach them, obviously, and it's illegal to have it as a pet. So when people contact you, what's the process there? Because I know in work in other places, there's one trying to track where it came from, but yet at the so that you could have some sense of where you might want to do some additional outreach education in that area. There's also for example, one of the groups that we work with in Kalimantan, Borneo, Western Kalimantan, Borneo, they have a policy of not really incriminating the person who turns the baby in.
Mm.
Because what they want to do is they don't want to say, you turn this in and now you're going to get prosecuted. It just sets up a sort of a bad omen for anyone else out there who thinks, oh, I shouldn't have this. I should turn it in, this baby orangutan. Um, i- what is that process that goes through in the DRC?
I mean, realistically, the DRC, as I'm sure you and most of your listeners are probably well aware, is very under-resourced. So we're talking about an environment where most law enforcement that happens in the DRC happens at the behest of request of um, someone else. So an institution like us going and saying, "Hey, we heard there's a bonobo. Can you go get the bonobo?" And then they go get the bonobo, and then we typically even pay for a lot of what they need to be able to do that because they're so under-resourced. So we're often paying even the way of the law enforcement to be able to go do the rescue. So, the part of so it's a big question, or it's a big, you brought up a few things in what you're asking. And so in terms of, does law enforcement go into the Congo and um find out about a baby and then go research and try to see where the baby came from and then go do education and awareness there? No, the answer is no. Law enforcement does not have those kinds of resources. The government in general does not have those kinds of resources. But we do that as much as we possibly can. So we know, for example, most of the poaching routes, they change over, when one gets found out, then they find a new route, and then you go and you do your awareness building along that route. But going into the heart of the rainforest and saying, where are the poachers actually going to kill the animals that they're killing? Because most poachers are not just killing bonobos, right? They're going in and killing a lot of things and taking out what they want and selling it for the variety, in the variety of ways that they can sell it. But sorry, I digressed.
Well, a
We
question in there
often,
is
yeah,
is
sorry.
is in Congo, does the law require that the wildlife department go rescue wildlife?
Yes,
I know in some countries you have to inform the wildlife department.
yes,
They have to actually execute the rescue.
yes.
You can't
Sorry.
go, even though you guys know it's there. You might have contacts in the area. You can't go in and get it and bring it to the sanctuary. Correct?
Absolutely. That's the context of that I should have said prior to explain to what I was saying, which is, yes, the law enforcement has to be the ones to do it. But because they're so under-resourced,
Right.
we work in conjunction with them in order to make that rescue happen. They have to seize the bonobo, get the bonobo to the airport, get the bonobo on the plane, get the bonobo, to Kinshasa, hand over, and then do the paperwork in Kinshasa, hand over the bonobo, and then we can have the bonobo and take them to the sanctuary.
To maybe give a little more context for folks, is where the bonobo is being poached is not just down the street from where the sanctuary
No,
is.
it's nowhere
So when
near.
you said putting it on a plane, I mean, I've traveled enough
Yes.
in the Congo to know, yeah, that's a journey.
It's
Maybe
about,
you
I mean,
could
it's pretty far from Kinshasa. Yeah, we're
I
talking.
mean, when I talk about, sorry, Ariel,
No,
but
no,
when I
go.
talk about scientists doing field work in the Congo Basin, I always tell people they might as well be on the moon.
Yes.
You are an astronaut. You are untethered from society and any safety net that all of us would be used to.
Yep.
And it is quite the endeavor to go into the interior and do one of these rescues, and it takes very brave people.
Yeah,
uh,
it was not an easy place to be rescuing anybody.
Yeah.
Dan, as you were saying, Brian, it's to do research. And maybe that's, that adds up to why here 50 years, after some of the very first research sites were set up, we still know so little. Just it's a really difficult place to work.
It's a brighter picture today, though, than it was, say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because people like Martin Serbeck, who's at Harvard, Zana Clay, obviously Gottfried Hohmann for many decades, and the Japanese field site in Wamba, you know, working for decades. Now, you know, each field site has had its strong moments and weak moments depending on what is the political situation. And but I will say Martin Serbeck, for instance, I think his group in the last 2 years has had 2 science papers or maybe 3. I can't even keep track. And so I think bonobos, in terms of scientifically, have really hit the mainstream in a way that they hadn't ever before. And so I do think that is a positive outcome, given what you're saying. I mean, it makes those accomplishments even more remarkable because the challenges have not gotten easier. If anything, they got harder, and yet they're delivering this high quality science in the best, places you can possibly publish.
Hmm.
One of the things that came out of the Kokolapori Research Center, where Martin Surbeck does his work recently, is about bonobo communication. So I don't know if you've heard about this, Jerry, but you should. Yeah, okay. If you haven't,
I have it listed in one of the questions I wanted to ask you. I mean, this is really fascinating
yeah,
stuff.
it's pretty
This
cool.
communication stuff. Yeah.
So
Yeah, go
obviously
ahead.
I'm again not a researcher, not a scientist, so I can't speak to the research, but what I can tell you is from a layman's point of view, this is a situation where they are discovering that bonobos have a kind of language, that they make the same sounds to mean the same things over and over in certain circumstances, and that indicates language. What really excites me about it, other than, okay, it's cool research, is that one of the lead researchers, is now currently at Lola studying to see what's different about the language that we might hear in the sanctuary environment, where all the bonobos came in very young. So they didn't all come from one place. They weren't all in one place. So I'm particularly excited to hear, what she has to say. She's been there for about 3 to 4 months now, listening to we'll post some stuff online soon about some of the sounds that she's been
Listening to their
discovering.
conversations.
Yeah, she's been eavesdropping on them. And she's going to tell us what they've been saying.
So I think that's a fun one. That's a fun one where Lola's going to play a role in helping, flesh out even more what bonobos are doing, a discovery that happened in the field first. I would say Lola, though, has been on the front, lines of making discoveries, too. And so, for instance, Susie Kwachwenda, who is in charge of bonobo welfare, worked with me long ago now, and we were able to run a bunch of experiments that shocked me. I didn't believe it when we were doing it, that bonobos would share food with strangers. They would share food with other bonobos they didn't even know. And subsequently, Martin's team and a whole group of amazing researchers have shown that in the wild, that wild bonobos are having similar interactions where they are basically meeting their neighboring groups, that if they were chimpanzees, it would be hostile and, not, necessarily going to end well for anyone. But bonobos are hanging out and sharing food and, having all sorts of, positive relationships. And so that's a nice one where it was really there was the hint of this from captivity, and now it's really been nicely observed in the wild.
That was one of the questions I had for you about the sanctuary, how much science goes on there, considering how, difficult it is to do science. Obviously, everything comes through the lens of they're in a semi-captive setting, and they've come there as orphans in the beginning. I mean, that has to be a filter you put on this. But how much science goes on?
As much
at
as
the
Still
sanctuary?
bonobos, though.
Yeah, they're still bonobos.
Yeah.
So, is there a lot of it?
There's as much as we can get. I mean, if anyone comes to us, if a PhD student comes or even a master's student comes to us with a good thesis and a good advisor, and we think that they have something that they can do that's not disruptive and isn't in any way engaging with the bonobos, but is observational, then, and again, Brian can speak to this way better than me, having done this himself many times, but from the point of view of the person vetting to give the information, to the team there to say, hey, do we want to do this research or not? That's the kind of thing we're looking for, and we love to do it.
I mean, the short version about what the scientific contribution has been of Lola Bonobo is that it has a publication record that is as robust or more robust than any field site with bonobos. So there have been at least 50 publications or more, and it has contributed to the highest level of journals, and it has many of the first and some of the only still comparisons between chimpanzees and bonobos occurred there. I think it's played a really important and fundamental role in bonobo research. The other thing that it did is historically there was really a division between captive bonobo researchers studying a few individuals that they could get access to, and then wild researchers studying wild bonobos, and they really didn't talk to each other. Except for maybe the literature. But because Lola is in Kinshasa, where all the field researchers have to go through, and it's a nice place to visit, people are meeting. It's a place that people mix and mingle. And I think some of the original research that occurred at Lola also has inspired a lot of the research that's going on now. And the community of young researchers has grown as a result of the possibility to go to Lola, led some to, go to Lola or even go beyond.
What role does Friends play? Where do you see Friends in the NGO that's here based in the U.S.? Where do you see your role in not only the sanctuary but bonobos in general in their survival? And what role can people play in supporting Friends of Bonobos and supporting the sanctuary and supporting the work that goes on there?
Well, at Friends of Bonobos, we have a two-pronged mission. We our number one reason for being is to support ABC, Amide Bonobo du Congo. That's the overarching organization of Lola Bonobo, our rewilding site, all our education and awareness, and all of our community development that happens in the Congo is under the umbrella of Amide Bonobo du Congo. That's their parent organization, and our role is as their sister association or sister organization to support them in a lot of different ways. The number one way we support them is financial resources. So we raise money for all of the work that they're doing. We also raise awareness for the work that they're doing, whether it's through a podcast like this one, or it's getting some media to go to the sanctuary and do a piece on them. Last year we were in Queens. So there was an entire episode all about bonobos, and we were integrally involved in the making of that series. If you want to see it, it's on Disney Plus and Hulu and National Geographic, and it's pretty awesome. Anyway, and we not to plug it or anything, but we
We'll put links to all of it too at the end
Brian's
at the end of
laughing
the
at me like,
YouTube
oh,
piece.
here she goes.
No.
That was great.
Well, that's what we're here for. Create awareness, and so
we raise
people
awareness.
can
We
see
raise
it.
we raise awareness for the work that they're doing through media, but primarily through financial resources. But then the other part of our mission is to raise awareness about bonobos in a general sense, globally. So we have a very robust social media platform, or a variety of social media platforms, but we have a very robust social media strategy, and we work with a lot of different media, again, like podcasts like this one, like to try to raise awareness, not just for the work that's happening in the Congo, but like you were saying earlier, for the species itself. Like, people need to know that bonobos exist, number one, and they need to know why bonobos are so cool, and that they're endangered and need help and support. So that's what we do here at Friends of Bonobos. We raise money, we raise awareness, and we try to make sure that ABC has what they need to do the work on the ground.
And the other thing that Ariel created is the fellowship, where you can join, and it's kind of nice because if you join the fellowship, you can get reminders, you can get updated, and get all sorts of great stories about what's going on with the bonobos. And that's a brilliant way that Friends of Bonobos and Ariel innovated to make it easier for all generations, maybe those not as social media savvy, to keep up with what's going on.
So, Ariel, this is World Bonobo Day, and it's Valentine's Day. So, what better way to love bonobos than maybe all those diamonds that people are going to give away? They could just donate the money instead to save bonobos. That'd be a nice idea, don't you think?
I think that's a great idea. I highly recommend it.
But on World Bonobo Day, what could people do today, right now, this day?
There are two big things that people can do to help bonobos. Number one is to raise awareness about them as a species. So whether that's follow us on social media, go on our website and join our listserv so that you can have access to regular updates and you know what you could tell other people about what's happening with bonobos. There's lots of ways that you can engage with the bonobo community and learn about bonobos, but most importantly, share what you're learning. Share what you know about bonobos and tell people about them. That's number one. The number two, and frankly, the most important thing that people can do to help bonobos is to donate. So you can go onto our website there's a lot of different ways to get on our website. The easiest thing to remember is savebonobos.org. So you can go to savebonobos.org and you could donate. And anything that you donate is going to go towards bonobo conservation in the Congo, goes to all of the things you've heard about us talking about today, rescuing bonobos, caring for them with the surrogate moms on the ground in the sanctuary, and for those that have the ability to be rewilding those bonobos. We also do education and awareness activities around anti-poaching and making sure communities understand why bonobos are important. And we also do community development around the rainforest that we're protecting. We protect bonobo habitat, and in order for that to work long term, we have to work with the communities and engage with the communities. And actually, the communities manage the protected forest, and we just support them. So there's a lot of different ways that we're working in bonobo conservation. It's a very holistic program, and by donating financially, you help make sure that we can do all of that work.
It is a feel good donation. Especially on Valentine's Day, because you have a species that is one of our closest living relatives, and they really have something that I wish we could be more like in their ability to get along so well and not hurt each other in horrible ways. And they show so much compassion and concern for each other. And then this organization is doing such a great job to make sure that they're around for us and future generations. Ariel does a great job making sure you'll hear about all the stories and updates of the individuals that you're going to be helping take care of.
What would be 25 years from now, if we were sitting here having this podcast, what would you be saying? What would you like to be saying about bonobos?
So I would say in 25 years, as many people know what a bonobo is as they do a chimpanzee. We've done surveys where actually people are pretty aware of what a chimpanzee is, but not bonobos. And we're equally related to both. We have these two cousins that are closest relatives. We should know about both. We need both of them to learn about ourselves. And they both are these amazing beings we share the planet with. So that would be number one. Number two is, as an organization, I would hope that our release program continues to grow and that we are able to protect the rewilded bonobos and really offer a plan B. But then the other thing is hopefully all our education in situ has had the impact and continues to have the impact that it has been having, and there aren't as many orphans coming in. That would be the dream.
First of all, in 25 years, I obviously would like for everyone to know what a bonobo is, or at least as many people who know what an elephant is or a chimp is to know what a bonobo is. And as importantly, that they would understand why knowing about bonobos can be helpful to us as human beings. So I would love for in 25 years to see that maybe the human landscape is saying, hey, there's this species we're just as closely related to as chimps. And just like we've always kind of said, well, hey, we compete with each other and we're just animals like chimps, right? Like we have this way about us. But I mean, look at the animal world. This is our nature. It's in our nature to compete and hurt each other and kill each other. And if you look at nature, you can see that that's true because our closest relatives are chimps. But it turns out we are as equally related to another great ape species that has a completely different way of doing things. And I'd love to see in 25 years human beings saying, hey, we don't actually have to be like chimps at all. We can instead work together in a cooperative way. We can share with strangers. We can have female leaders band together to stop the things that they don't want to see, in particular violence. That's what I'd love to see in sort of the human world around bonobos. In terms of what we're doing in the field and bonobo conservation, I hope that by then what we'd like to see happen by then is that the sanctuary is really more of like just a rehabilitation center. So a bonobo comes in because they've been rescued, they are rehabilitated and very quickly rewilded. And that it's not a place where bonobos spend the majority of their lives. And it's less of a sanctuary and more of a place for the bonobos to come in and have a transition moment so that they can go back to the wild. But way more importantly than that there are way fewer because poaching has died down and the need for that is not as great. And so we can spend our time and energy and resources on saving rainforest areas where wild bonobos already live and keeping those bonobos safe and protected, just like they are in Ecolo, our rewilded area now.
Something to dream for. Well, thank you both for sharing this
Thank
time
you.
on World Bonobo Day. And we really appreciate you guys being on Talking Apes. This was really great fun and great to have the founder of Talking Apes in some way. Brian Hare, good to have you back.
Proud to be back and amazed at all you've done. And it's such
So cool.
important work. Thank you so much for the service you're doing to our whole community and to all the apes out there that you've helped as a result.
It's been great fun. It's been like a little kid getting to talk to some of the coolest people on the planet like you both. So thank you.